As we continue our journey in the world of Windows Server 2016, the next few lessons are going to be talking about GPOs. GPOs came out in about 1934. I was a mere 12 years old when I heard about GPOs, and I was thinking, these are going to be epic. And sure enough, 80 years later, they are epic. In fact, these are the most powerful option that we have to work with when it comes to working with Active Directory services. They can do about everything except for maybe pouring you a bevy. So I want to begin in this sublesson with an introduction to Group Policy Objects, or GPOs. And the first thing is a definition. They provide the ability to configure and manage objects, computer objects, user objects, whatever you have in ADDS, within your network infrastructure. They're applied to your sites. Remember, we have our physical sites, default first site name. We also created the London and we created the Dublin sites. Domains, we've been talking about domain A and domain B, and organization units, and they make it much easier for us to manage our users and our computers that are looking for similar settings or the same settings. So we can create one GPO and apply it to multiple users, whether it be at an OU level, domain level, or site level. That's the power of GPOs. And as an example here, we have our domain A and two different sites, Site A and Site B. If I wanted similar behavior but slightly different behavior for my users in Site A versus Site B, I could apply the GPO at the site level. Well, maybe in Site A I have domain A and domain B, and I want slightly different behavior in domain A versus domain B within Site A. Bingo, I apply the GPO at the domain level. Well, let's go a little bit lower. Maybe within OUs, within domain A, which is part of Site A, I want yet again slightly different behavior. I can apply a GPO at the OU level as well. These are very powerful tools and popular for managing the behavior of users and computers. GPOs can be broken down into 5 primary categories, and there's tons of subcategories when we get in there, and we're going to be exploring all of these categories. We have the first one, which is Windows and App Settings. This allows your users to have consistency between the apps that they're using, as well as the Windows settings. Software deployment, you can actually use group policies for deploying and updating applications on a user's desktop. And when you're ready to toast it, you can use a group policy to toast it as well. We can redirect our users' local folders to a network share. I want all my users to have their local documents stored in a network share because we're backing that up, so I can configure folder redirection. And we can apply standard security settings to our users and computers. And lastly, infrastructure settings, things like wireless network profiles and firewalls, all done in a central location through our GPOs. Now we have a couple different types of GPOs. We have the local group policies. Those are for our computers that are not part of the forest. You apply these to a computer regardless of who's logging on. And we have both admin and non-admin local group policies, which means they're applied to the user based on whether or not they're part of the local administrators group. So if I'm logging as a local administrator, I may not have all the restrictions as a non-administrator. And also, you can apply local policies to security groups. And we can set up specific user settings if the clients are running Windows 8 or if your servers are running Windows Server 2012. Now, comparing those to the domain-based GPOs, we have a group policy container, which is the object stored in Active Directory services. This is replicated to all the DCs in the domain using the ADDS replication we previously talked about. We also have a group policy template. Yeah, these are extremely powerful because instead of starting everything from scratch, I can create a template, and that template can contain most of the preset configurations I want for everyone anyways, and then I can tweak the GPO based on where I want to apply that GPO. And remember, we talked about sysvol that's available on all the DCs. This is where that collection of files and folders of these GPO settings are stored, and that default location for the GPOs in sysvol is in the system root sysvol domain policies, and then there's a unique GUID assigned to the GPO. So these are the 2 different types of GPOs that we have available to us, as well as the location of your domain-based GPOs. When applying a GPO, we have 2 different nodes in there. One's computer configuration and one's user configuration. So computer configuration, regardless of who uses this computer, I want the same behavior. We have a user configuration where I want specific behavior based on who's logging on. And under our 2 top level nodes, we have folders where we have software settings for managing our software installation. We have Windows settings, which contain scripts, security settings, and folder redirection. And then we have administrative templates that are available for applying specific behavior. And then we have 3 different values that are applied at the GPO level: enabled, disabled, and normally the default is not configured. So we'll have to go in and actually enable or disable based on what behavior we want to appear at the user or the computer level. Now you have to be careful of the wording, and I'll show you this when we go live here, because sometimes it may say disable desktop settings. Well, if I want to disable the desktop settings, I need to enable that disable of the desktop settings. Now, how do we manage the GPOs? We've got tools. Our first tool is the GPMC, the Group Policy Management Console. This is where I can go in and create a GPO. I can link GPO to a container. I can perform filtering. I can create a model so I can use it as a template, and I can troubleshoot GPOs. The Group Policy Management Editor doesn't do quite as much. I can view and configure GPOs, but notice I can't create or troubleshoot GPOs within the editor. And of course, we have PowerShell. We have create, which is the new-GPO. We have link, which is new-GP link, and we can configure GPOs using the set-GP link. Let's pop out and explore the GPO characteristics that we just introduced. So here we are in our image, and we're going to start at Tools, which is normally where we start. We're going to go down to Group Policy Management Console. And inside of here, we're going to see that we have domains, and specifically, it's located our azmtp pearson.com domain. So remember, I can apply a group policy at this level here, the domain level, or I can go to an organizational unit. So as I click on azmtp users, I right-click, and I can link an existing group policy there, or create a new group policy and link it here. And I can go to sites. So if I expand sites, I don't have any sites in there, so I'll right-click, I'll show sites. I'll just grab Dublin. I'll do an OK. And at this point, I can link an existing GPO to here. So the 3 levels we can apply group policies: domain, site, and organizational unit. Let's go back to domains. We'll click on this guy here. We're going to go to an existing group policy that we have out of the box by default. We're going to go to link group policy objects. Everything I've done so far is in the Group Policy Management Console. But as soon as I find a group policy and I right-click and I go into edit mode, now I'm going into the Group Policy Management Editor. Here's our 2 nodes, computer configuration and user configuration. I'll go ahead and click on computer first. Here are the policies. And you'll see that we have the 3 folders. We have the software settings, the Windows settings, and the admin templates. I'll click on the software settings. We have software installation, but at this point, there's nothing in there. So let me go back up here. Let me go to Windows settings. You'll see that we have name resolution policy. And because we're looking at the computer configuration, we have startup and shutdown scripts, deployed printers, security settings, and then policy-based QoS. Let me go ahead and collapse that. And then we're going to expand on administrative templates, and I'll click on it. Notice we have control panel options: network, printers, server, system, Windows components. There's just a plethora of components that we can configure through here. If I expand on control panel, for instance, we can go into personalization, and we can look at things like prevent enabling lock screen camera, prevent enabling lock screen slideshow, force a specific default lock screen and logon image. So these are some of the options that we have in here. Let me collapse that, collapse this one. Let me go to my user policies, and then we'll go into Windows settings here. Notice now with scripts we have log on and log off because it's a user performing an action. They're logging on, logging off versus a computer that's shutting down or starting up. And then we can go into administrative templates in here. We'll go into control panel again, and we have add or remove programs. And you'll see we have different options for configuration as a user level within the control panel. And then we have personalization, programs, regional and language options. We can go to the desktop. Again, a plethora of options for us. We can spend hours in here configuring these. That's why it's really helpful for you to do some modeling or create templates. Here's the group policy modeling option. Right-click and open up the wizard for this. Helps you simulate a policy deployment for planning and testing purposes. So this is the what-if wizard, I call it, because it's going to allow me to go through and create a group policy, including security group membership, locations, and filters, but I don't have to apply it. It's just what if I did create this group policy, how would it affect my users? Here we have the group policy results. This is the uh-oh wizard, because now I've already applied the group policies and I want to see the end result of those group policies. So we have a couple different tools, or wizards specifically, that we can use for seeing the results of a group policy before applying it and seeing the results of a group policy after applying it. Well, now that I have you completely overwhelmed with the number of group policies that we can create, I'm going to provide you some help here. The first piece of help is called the GPO Central Store. It's a repository for your administrative templates, which contains two types of files: ADMX files, which actually contain the settings, and ADML files, which contains a localized explanation of those settings. Localized means I can have different flavors based on different native languages. This prevents the need for duplicate GPOs to associate with each language. However, you have to use the appropriate template for each of the supported operating systems. This central store doesn't exist by default, so you have a 4-step process to create it. Log on to a computer using administration permissions and go into the policy definitions folder, which is part of the SQL and Windows directory. You'll connect to a sysfile share on one of your domain controllers, preferably the one closest to you in your LAN. You're going to paste the folder to your sysfile, your domain policies on the DC, and then you're going to give it some time for the new folder to replicate to other DCs in the domain. So this is going to allow you to share templates in multiple languages across multiple DCs. So that's one shortcut for you. Another shortcut is the use of starter GPOs. This is a template that you'll use for creating other GPOs. It's similar settings that you're going to want to use in future GPOs. ADDS contains two default starter GPOs, the Group Policy Remote Update Firewall ports, as well as the Group Policy Reporting Firewall ports. However, you can make other customizations that you're going to want in future GPOs. And you'll have one administrative template node, and then you can export the starter GPOs to a CAB file using the Save as Cabinet button, and then you'll import a cabinet file that you've exported using the Load Cabinet button. And one more thing that really makes these work is linking the GPOs to the containers. And you can link the GPO to the container using the GPMC or using the PowerShell command new-gp link. And as you saw, you can link them to a site, a domain, or an organizational unit by simply right-clicking on the respective container and use the option called Link an Existing GPO. And to create a GPO using PowerShell, as I mentioned, it's the new-gp link. You give it a name, you specify the target, and use the LDAP name. As we see here, we have OU equal HR, comma DC equal Pearson, comma DC equal com. You can also create and link a GPO using PowerShell, and you'll use a combination of new-GPO along with a piping of new-GP link that contains your target. And to expedite the link process, you can link a GPO to multiple containers simultaneously. Let's step back out to our domain controller and see how to create a GPO using the starter GPOs and then linking that GPO to a container. So we're in our Group Policy Management console. I'm going to expand on domains. I'm going to expand our azmtppearson.com domain, and here we have a container called Starter GPOs. In order to create the Starter GPO folder, we have to press this button right here, and it's going to create our two GPOs that we talked about, specifically the Group Policy Remote Update Firewall ports and the Group Policy Reporting Firewall ports. And this button here is used to export to a CAB file, a GPO, and this is how I import that CAB file using the Load Cabinet button. I'm going to go ahead and right-click and do New, and we're going to call this the MTP GPO, and this is going to be very, very basic. I'll go ahead and click on that. Then I'm going to right-click. I'm going to click Edit, so we're now going into the Group Policy Management Editor. And as I mentioned, we only have the administrative templates under the computer configuration as well as the user configuration. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the user configuration. We'll go into Desktop. And let's say this is a kiosk machine, and we don't want to save the user's configuration. So I'm going to click on Don't Save Settings at Exit. Let me scroll over here. You'll see it's not configured. We'll right-click. We'll edit. And then in here, we're going to enable. So we're going to enable the Do Not Save. We'll go ahead and do an OK. And now we've created a starter GPO. So let's go ahead and come back out of here. I'll just collapse this because that's what I do. We'll close this now. We'll then right-click, and we'll create a new GPO from Starter GPO. And we're going to call this the MTP Good Stuff, real technical term. And notice the source starter is MTP GPO. So we now have a new GPO. Let's assign it to our AZMTP Users Organizational Unit. We'll right-click, we'll link an existing GPO. Here's my MTP Good Stuff. We'll click OK. And now we've created a starter GPO. We've used that as a template for a new GPO, and we've assigned that GPO to a container, in this case here, the AZMTP Users Organizational Unit. And that's the steps necessary for creating, configuring, and linking a GPO.